So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah!
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, the Detroit Lions went into week 2 as a relatively healthy football team, right? Taylor Decker, of course, was missing a game, as well as starting boundary cornerback Emmanuel Mosley was missing the second game of the season. But other than that, relatively healthy. Josh Pascal is going to miss some time. Khalil Dorsey is going to miss some time. But as far as starters go, there's only 2 players missing, and most of the team was relatively healthy going into week 2. That unfortunately did not remain the case, as the Detroit Lions suffered a ton of injuries throughout the second week of the NFL season, including starting running back David Montgomery, starting number 1 wide receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown. You, of course, had starting guard Halapoulivaati Vaitai. You had wide receiver Antoine Green, and several other players leave the game due to injury concerns. And today we got a little bit of an update about which players are going to continue to be hurt, which players are going to miss a little bit of time, and which players we're going to need to keep an eye on as far as playing next week or not. So we're going to go case by case. We're going to take a look at every single injury that happened yesterday and kind of get a look at how this team is looking and how this team is shaping up going into week 3, coming off of that loss. So let's start off with Taylor Decker, a player that didn't play last week versus the Seattle Seahawks due to his ankle injury. He missed week 2. He was doubtful a couple days before the game and was officially ruled out the night before kickoff. Taylor Decker is considered day-to-day, but Dan Campbell has said there has been steady improvement and very good signs that Taylor Decker will return to play in week 3. Needed a week off just to rest his ankle, make sure the injury doesn't go anywhere else, and he is going to return, meaning the offensive line is nearly back to full strength with Taylor Decker at left tackle, Jonah Jackson at left guard, Frank Ragnow at center, likely Graham Glasgow taking over the right guard position, with Penei Sewell returning to right tackle. That offensive line, despite missing one of their better guards and despite missing one of their better players, more underrated players in Big V, is still a very strong unit and should be able to hold down the fort until Big V eventually does return this line to full strength. Now, another big injury from yesterday was David Montgomery. Right after the game, it was rumored that David Montgomery might miss a couple weeks. He might miss 2, maybe even 3 weeks, but wasn't going to be placed on IR as it wasn't that bad. He currently has been ruled with a thigh contusion, essentially just a very deep thigh bruise. And right after the game, he was limping around in the locker room, seemed to be kind of, not very optimistic about his recovery, said he might miss a week or 2. However, he is considered day-to-day right now. There have been several doctors across different platforms saying that there is a possibility that he plays next week, but there's also a possibility that he's going to sit out next week versus the Atlanta Falcons and will return Thursday night versus the Green Bay Packers. He will likely miss a game just based on his presumption and based off the way the coaches have been talking. It seems as though it is possible he will miss 1 game, but shouldn't miss any more than that. He is currently questionable to play in week 3. There is a possibility, but I give it probably a 60-40 that he is going to sit out. Moving on to Antoine Green. Antoine Green played just 7 snaps in week 2 versus the Seattle Seahawks, had his first career reception for 2 yards, but then was hit in the head and was diagnosed, or at least placed into concussion protocol. We don't have a ton of information about it yet. We don't know if he has a concussion. We don't know if it's just, a precautionary protocol type thing. This is just a wait and see. He could still possibly play on Sunday versus Atlanta, but this is another injury to consider, that if he is placed into concussion protocol long-term and is diagnosed with a concussion, he could miss next week, as well as it seemed like his role was expanding a little bit going into week 2, and he could see a larger target volume as opposed to what he saw in week 1. Now it gets kind of serious. The other injuries weren't necessarily as bad. Taylor Decker's coming back. David Montgomery's missing at most 1 game. And of course, obviously at the worst, hopefully, Antoine Green is missing 1 game. the next injuries are a little bit more serious. Vaitai went down in the fourth quarter with a very serious knee injury. He was rolled up. He didn't get up off the ground. He was essentially carried off the field. And it is said, although we don't have any diagnosis, we don't have any official word from the Detroit Lions or any doctors, it does seem like a very serious injury that could keep Big V out for several weeks, potentially landing him on IR. Now, no player has been placed on IR yet. That will likely happen either later today or early tomorrow. We are going to know the severity of the Big V injury, but as of right now, it doesn't look good. It seems as though Big V could miss 3+ weeks, if not even more than that. Potentially, like I said, being placed on IR, freeing up that roster spot for them to maybe even bring in a guard, an extra tackle, or something like that to replace the hole left by Big V. And honestly, it's a really big shame because Big V was playing very well. He played really, really well in 2021 when he was healthy, didn't allow a sack, only had 3 penalties. Last year, of course, missed the entirety of the season with his back injury, came back, didn't allow a pressure in week 1, didn't allow a pressure in week 2, and unfortunately went down with that knee injury. Hopefully he's okay because the offensive line is significantly better and the rushing attack is significantly better with him at the helm, but he's going to have to wait. He's going to have to rest and heal up and will likely miss at least a month of football, if not even more. James Houston, the pass rushing phenomenon from last season, a player that a lot of people were very excited for this year, has also been injured. James Houston has fractured his ankle, or at least a part of his ankle, and is likely going to require surgery. He is going to be placed on IR, and as far as what people are projecting, it seems as though it's going to be a 6 to 8 week injury. Now, that does not mean that he is done for the season. He will likely return around week 10 in time for the playoff stretch. That is right after Jameson Williams is set to return. That is a few weeks after Josh Pascal is projected to return. Hopefully, the Lions can get healthy in this span, and they don't necessarily need James Houston's ability, but we've all seen the difference between the pass rush with James Houston and the pass rush without James Houston. With James Houston, it's not too bad. When James Houston and Pascal and Kaminsky and Onwuzurike and Aiden Hutchinson are all going after the passer at the same time, the pass rush doesn't look too bad. When James Houston isn't in there, they can double team Aiden Hutchinson, and with Pascal out specifically, the pass rush is significantly downgraded without both Pascal and James Houston in there. And it is, of course, very, very unfortunate that he is also missing time just a couple days after Josh Pascal was placed on injured reserve. Now, we do have no update on Emmanuel Moseley. We don't know whether or not he is going to play in week 3. He's not placed on IR. That means he's probably going to return either this week or next week. Ideally, he returns this week for a much-needed upgrade to the Detroit Lions secondary, but at this time, we do not know. Other players that were suffering injuries on yesterday's game include Aiden Hutchinson, who did return at the very end, so it does seem he will be okay. Amon-Ra St. Brown was dealing with cramps throughout the entire game, but again, is going to be fine, as well as Kirby Joseph and CJ Gardner-Johnson, both leaving the game early in the first quarter, but eventually returning to play. Both of them seem to be okay as well, just suffering from some minor nicks and bruises throughout the game, accustomed to tackling 6'5", 225 DK Metcalf. These players do seem to be okay and will likely not miss any time, but as they did miss time yesterday against Seattle, I did want to mention it and just put out there that they're probably okay, but it could be a very minute detail to follow. So with that being said, that is all we have for you guys today. That is the Detroit Lions injury update. Obviously, not a fun topic to talk about. Favorite players aren't playing. Big impact players aren't playing for the Detroit Lions. James Houston is out for several weeks. Vaitai is out for several weeks. You know, David Montgomery could miss a couple weeks. It is not good to be missing your weapons, to be missing your top offensive linemen, to be missing your top pass rushers. But unfortunately, that is a part of the game. This is going to be a stretch the Detroit Lions just have to survive. They're going to have to survive until Josh Pascal gets back. They're going to have to survive until Vaitai gets back. And I think they're a deep enough team to do so. But unfortunately, several players are going to be missing a little bit more time. So with all that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments below how you feel about the injuries. What do you think is the best way to combat these injuries? Potentially add a couple players to the roster to kind of fill in the gaps left by these injured players. Very curious to hear what you guys have to say. And if you have yet to subscribe, please go down below and do that. Helps the channel out a ton, helps us grow, and of course helps the video and Lions news spread. But with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, And as always, go Lions.